What happens when a beloved country star shows up for what should be a routine morning show spot, only to find himself blindsided by controversy no one saw coming? Blake Shelton thought his appearance on the Today Show would be business as usual. A little banter with Jenna Bush Hager, a few laughs, and some promotion for his new album and tour. Instead, what unfolded left the studio in stunned silence, and viewers glued to their screens. The day began like any other at Rockefeller Plaza. Blake arrived around 7:30 a.m., coffee in hand, flashing his trademark easygoing smile as he greeted the crew. This was supposed to be standard fare. Talk a little music, maybe swap a funny voice story, plug the new record, and head out. Jenna was already on set, shuffling her notes with producers. Normally their chemistry was effortless. She knew how to draw out Blake's humor, and audiences loved their down-to-earth rapport. But this morning felt different. Jenna's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Producers whispered in the corner, stealing worried glances at their phones. Even before the cameras rolled, Blake sensed it. Something was off. "Everything okay over there, Jenna?" he asked, leaning back in his chair with a half grin. "You look like somebody told you your dog ate your homework." She laughed, but it was strained. "Oh, you know how it is. Just making sure we cover everything today. We've got a lot to talk about." The weight she put on those last words made Blake raise an eyebrow. He'd done enough interviews to know when a host had an agenda. This felt like one of those moments. Still, once the red light blinked on, everything seemed normal. Jenna welcomed him warmly, and they traded jokes about fishing trips and The Voice. But then, her tone shifted. "Blake," she said, voice tightening just slightly, "I want to talk about something a little more serious, if that's okay." His smile faltered. He nodded cautiously. "Sure thing, Jenna. Fire away." There've been some recent comments you made during a radio interview. Comments about the direction of country music and some of your fellow artists. Can you explain what you meant when you said some newer performers are, quote, losing touch with what country music really means? The question hit him like a cold splash of water. He'd done dozens of radio spots lately. Yes, he'd shared some strong opinions, but nothing he thought would land him in hot water on national television. "Well, I think there's some context missing there," Blake said carefully, his Oklahoma drawl now edged with caution. "I love seeing new artists bring fresh energy to the genre. That's what keeps country alive, but..." Jenna wasn't letting him slip by. She glanced at her card, then looked him straight in the eye. "But you also said some artists are more focused on building a social media presence than writing songs. You told that Nashville host," she lifted the card for emphasis, "that some of these new performers, and I quote, wouldn't know real country if it bit them in the behind." Those are strong words. "Blake!" Blake's jaw tightened. He remembered now. That offhand comment during a casual radio chat. What he hadn't expected was to have it thrown back at him, on live TV, in front of millions. But the way Jenna framed it made Blake sound like he'd launched a personal attack on specific artists. Something he had never intended. "Hold on there. Jenna," Blake said, his voice carrying the same edge his fans had heard when he wasn't in the mood to play nice. "You're taking comments out of context and making them sound a whole lot more explosive than they really were." The atmosphere in the studio shifted instantly. Producers exchanged uneasy glances. Camera operators stiffened behind their lenses. And even the live audience seemed to sense they were watching the segment slip into dangerous territory. Jenna didn't flinch. "I'm just reading your words, Blake. Since that interview aired, several artists have responded online, saying they felt like you were talking about them directly. How do you respond to that?" Blake's jaw clenched. Years of media training kept his voice steady, but the temper beneath was starting to smolder. He had been speaking broadly about industry trends, yet Jenna was painting him as if he'd gone after colleagues by name. "You know what, Jenna?" he said, leaning forward, his voice dropping into a low, deliberate register. "I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've always tried to support younger artists coming up in this business. If somebody wants to twist a general comment and take it personally, that says more about them than it does about me." The tension now hung heavy in the air. What should have been a lighthearted morning chat was turning into a showdown. Still, Jenna pressed. Whether it was producer pressure to land a viral clip, or her own conviction that Blake needed to be challenged, she wasn't backing down. "But Blake," she countered, "with the kind of platform you have, don't you think you need to be more careful about how your words are interpreted? You're not just another guy giving his opinion at a bar. You're Blake Shelton. Your words carry weight." The flash in Blake's eyes was unmistakable. The easygoing country star facade was giving way to the shrewd veteran who had survived and thrived in one of the most cutthroat industries in entertainment. "So now you're telling me how I should use my platform?" Blake shot back, his voice rising just enough to make every head in the studio snap up. "I've been using my platform to launch careers and lift up other artists since before some of the people you're talking about ever picked up a guitar." Jenna swallowed but pressed on, her tone steady. "I'm not telling you what to do, Blake. I'm asking if you'll take responsibility for the way your words landed. Do you think it's fair that newer artists now feel like they have to defend their authenticity because of something you said?" Blake let out a short, humorless laugh, the kind that longtime fans would instantly recognize as a warning. "You know what's not fair? Having my words twisted to stir up drama where none existed. I was talking about the industry as a whole, about patterns I've seen after 2 decades in this business." Jenna looked down at her cards, then back up. "But surely you understand why artists like Morgan Wade and Parker McCollum might feel singled out. When you question whether newer performers understand real country, how else are they supposed to hear that?" The names landed like a lit match on gasoline. Blake's expression hardened, his patience snapping. "Hold it right there," he said, his voice sharp now. "I never mentioned those artists by name, and I'd never attack them personally. Morgan Wade is one of the most talented singers out there, and Parker's got more real country in his little finger than half the industry combined. The fact that you're trying to spin this into some feud with people I actually respect, that right there is what's wrong with the media today." Jenna's face flickered, just for a moment, with the awareness that she might have gone too far. But the cameras were rolling, the interview had momentum of its own, and retreat wasn't an option. "I'm only trying to understand your perspective," she said carefully. "When you tell a reporter that some artists wouldn't know real country if it bit them, how are people supposed to interpret that?" "They're supposed to use some common sense," Blake suddenly erupted, the mask slipping completely. The studio fell into stunned silence. For the first time all morning, the country superstar wasn't smiling, wasn't joking. He was done playing nice. "I was talking about the formulaic, manufactured stuff that gets shoved through the system without heart or soul," Blake said, his voice cutting through the silence. "I wasn't naming names. I wasn't targeting individuals. But apparently, nuance doesn't sell in today's clickbait culture." The studio was frozen. Even the crew, veterans of plenty of live TV drama, looked stunned. This wasn't the Blake Shelton they were used to seeing. The laid-back jokester. This was something else. Jenna tried to steady herself, but Blake pressed forward. "You want to talk about responsibility?" he said, leaning forward, his tone sharpening. "How about taking responsibility for turning a real conversation about the music industry into a circus? For cherry-picking my words and stripping out context so you can manufacture controversy? Blake, I understand you're upset." "Upset?" He cut her off, rising from his chair and unclipping his microphone. "I'm not upset, Jenna. I'm disappointed. Disappointed that someone I considered a friend would ambush me like this. Disappointed that a show I've always respected has traded honest journalism for cheap sensationalism." The gesture of pulling off his mic sent a shiver through the room, Everyone knew what it meant. He was ready to walk, so that's it? Jenna asked quickly, her voice tight. You're just going to storm off instead of having an adult conversation? Blake froze mid-step, his hand still on the mic pack at his waist. For a moment it looked like he'd leave, but then he turned back. His eyes were darker now, his voice low and dangerous. An adult conversation? He repeated. An adult conversation would have been you, or your producers, calling me ahead of time and saying, "Hey, there's been some reaction to your comments. Can we discuss it?" What you did was set me up, on live television, and then tried to paint me as a bully attacking young artists. That's not a conversation, Jenna. That's a stunt. Color rushed into Jenna's face, but she kept her composure. Admitting he was right wasn't an option. I'm just doing my job, Blake. Sometimes that means asking tough questions. Blake laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was sharp, bitter, the sound of someone finally done playing along. Your job used to be about informing people, having real conversations. Now it's about viral clips and controversy. Well, congratulations. You got your viral moment? The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the steady hum of the cameras seemed louder than usual. Blake scanned the studio, the crew avoiding his eyes, the producers frozen behind the glass, and then shook his head. You know what's tragic? He said, walking toward the edge of the set. I came here ready to talk about the new album, about the up-and-coming artists I've been working with, about a charity project launching next month. But instead, we wasted everyone's time chasing fake drama. At the exit, he turned back one last time. His voice softened, but the bite in it remained. And for the record, Jenna, some of the most authentic country music I've heard in years has come from artists half my age. But I guess that doesn't make for good TV, does it? The challenge in his tone hung in the air like smoke. Jenna could have de-escalated. She could have let him walk. But instead, she pushed. Blake, wait! She called out, her voice edged with steel. If you walk away now, doesn't that prove you can't handle being questioned about your own words? That was the breaking point. Blake stopped cold, his shoulders stiff. Slowly he turned. The expression on his face made the room shrink. When he spoke, his voice was calm. Eerily calm. You want to talk about handling things, Jenna? Let's talk about how you've handled this. You invited me here under false pretenses. You ambushed me with out-of-context quotes. And now you're questioning my character when I call you on it. He took a step closer, his words like steel. That's not journalism. That's tabloid trash. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Everyone in the studio knew that Blake had just crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Calling a respected morning show host tabloid trash on live television was the kind of headline that could follow him for years. But Blake didn't flinch. He looked like a man who had already decided he had nothing left to lose. Jenna's mask of composure finally cracked. Tabloid trash? Blake, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've covered wars, natural disasters, and presidential elections. Don't you dare sit there and lecture me about journalism! Then act like a journalist, instead of a gossip columnist. Blake shot back, his voice reverberating through the hushed studio. A real journalist would have presented both sides. A real journalist would have given me a chance to explain before dragging me through the mud on national TV. What had started as an interview now looked more like a live, unfiltered feud. The audience at home was watching two people go for the jugular, every word dripping with anger. You know what, Blake? Jenna snapped. Maybe the problem isn't how I presented your words. Maybe the problem is your words. Maybe you need to face that your comments were hurtful and divisive, instead of blaming everyone else for how they landed. Blake's eyes hardened, then softened, shifting in a way that caught Jenna off guard. The fury was still there, but layered with something else. Pity. Jenna, I've known you for years. I've respected you. I thought of you as a friend. But right now, I don't even recognize you. This isn't the woman who asked thoughtful questions and listened. This is something else entirely. For the first time since the clash began, Jenna faltered. There was something raw in his tone, something that sliced through her defenses. She opened her mouth, but he cut her off with a raised hand. Let me finish. I don't know if this push came from you, your producers, or some exec upstairs chasing clicks. But this isn't journalism. This is character assassination dressed up as an interview. And I'm not gonna sit here and play along. With a quiet finality, Blake unclipped his mic pack and placed it gently on the coffee table. Unlike before, there was no fury in the gesture, just resignation. I came here today ready to talk about music, about new artists I'm mentoring, about a charity project that actually matters. Instead, I walked into a setup. That's on me for trusting the wrong people, but I'll be damned if I make it worse by staying. He turned toward the exit, but Jenna's voice cracked across the silence. Blake, please. Let's reset. We can start over. Talk about the music, the projects. Blake paused, but didn't turn back. Jenna, some things you can't reset. Some things, once they're said, change everything. This is one of those things. And with that, Blake Shelton walked off the Today Show set, leaving behind one of the most uncomfortable moments in morning television history. The cameras lingered just long enough to capture Jenna's stunned expression before cutting to commercial. Behind the scenes, chaos erupted. Producers scrambled, publicists dialed frantically, and within minutes the footage was already flooding social media timelines. Blake's team fielded calls from every outlet in the country, while the network's PR department went into full-blown crisis mode. But the moment that told the real story came later, as Blake was leaving the building. A young production assistant, barely out of college, stopped him in the lobby, voice trembling. Mr. Shelton, I just wanted to say, I heard the original radio interview. You did? Blake asked, his tone softening. Yes, and I don't think you said anything wrong. What happened up there? It wasn't fair. For the first time that morning, Blake's expression warmed. He gave her a gentle nod. Thanks, sweetheart. That means more than you know. Just remember, in this business, context is everything. Don't ever let anyone twist your words or your intentions. With that, Blake stepped out into the New York morning. The fallout was only beginning, and the clash would be dissected for weeks. But one truth was undeniable. No one in that studio or watching at home would forget what had just unfolded. So, what do you think really happened here? Was Blake right to call out what he saw as ambush journalism? Or should he have handled the tough questions more diplomatically? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments below whether you think Blake was justified in walking off or if Jenna was just doing her job as a journalist.